They say you can't put a price on a human life. But I did. I appraised my husband's life, and the cost was my soul, a surgical scar, and a secret that was never meant to leave the sterile white walls of the intensive care unit. My name is Elena. For 15 years, I was the wife of a man named Mark, a man whose heart was as big as his luck was bad. Mark was a high school basketball coach, the kind of guy who'd give you the shirt off his back even if it was snowing. Everyone loved Mark, including me. But love and passion aren't always the same thing, are they? 3 years ago, Mark's kidneys started to fail. It was a slow, agonizing decline. He went from a vibrant man running drills on the court to a ghost sitting in a recliner, hooked up to a dialysis machine 3 days a week. The vibrant blue of his eyes turned a muddy gray. His skin took on a yellowish tint. Watching him wither was like watching a slow-motion car crash that I couldn't look away from. Enter Julian. Julian was a surgeon at the very hospital where Mark received his treatments. He was everything Mark wasn't. Cold, precise, wealthy, and dangerous. Our affair didn't start with a spark. It started with a desperate need to feel something other than the crushing weight of Mark's impending death. While Mark slept off the exhaustion of dialysis, I was in Julian's high-rise apartment, trying to forget the smell of antiseptic and the sound of machines. The guilt was a constant hum in the background of my life, but I justified it. I told myself I was recharging so I could be a better caregiver. I told myself that Mark didn't have much time left anyway. But then, the call came. Mark's condition had plateaued. He needed a transplant, and he needed it now. The list was years long, and his blood type was rare. I wasn't a match. His siblings weren't matches. We were looking at a death sentence. One night, lying in Julian's bed, I broke down. I sobbed about the unfairness of it all. Julian, usually so detached, watched me with an unreadable expression. "I'm O negative, Elena," he said quietly. I stopped breathing. "What?" "I'm a universal donor, and I've seen his charts. I'm a match." The silence in the room was deafening. The man I was betraying my husband with was the only man who could save him. "I'll do it," Julian said. "But not for him. For you. I don't want to watch you mourn him for the next 50 years. I want this over with. I'll donate anonymously. He'll never know it was me." It was a deal with the devil, I agreed. The surgery was scheduled for a month later. Mark was over the moon. He thought it was a miracle. A guardian angel donor had appeared out of nowhere. I had to walk a tightrope of deception. I sat by Mark's bed, holding his hand, while knowing that in the next wing of the hospital, my lover was being prepped to give up a piece of his body for my husband. The transplant was a success. Mark's body accepted the kidney immediately. Within 48 hours, the color was returning to his face. He looked like the man I'd married again. But Julian? Julian had complications. A post-operative infection set in. Because he was a surgeon, he tried to manage it himself, but he ended up back in the ICU, 2 floors above Mark. I was frantic. I was running between floors, playing the grateful wife in room 402 and the secret lover in room 612. The mistake happened on the 5th day. Mark was finally allowed to walk. He wanted to go to the chapel to pray for his anonymous donor. I tried to stop him, telling him he needed to rest, but he was stubborn. He leaned on his IV pole and shuffled out into the hallway. At that exact moment, a code blue was called on the 6th floor. I panicked. I thought it was Julian. I ran toward the elevator, leaving Mark standing by the nurse's station. I didn't realize that in my haste, my phone had fallen out of my pocket. Mark picked it up. By the time I realized I'd lost it, it was too late. Julian's phone was sitting on his bedside table in the ICU, and I had been sending him frantic, unfiltered texts all morning. "Please hold on. Mark is better, but I can't lose you. Thank you for doing this for us. I love you." Mark didn't go to the chapel. He followed me. He found me standing outside Julian's glass-walled ICU room, crying as the doctors worked on him. Mark stood at the end of the hallway, clutching his IV pole for dear life. He looked at the phone in his hand, then at me, then at the man behind the glass. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He saw the donor's name on the chart outside the door. He saw my face. He connected the dots that no human being should ever have to connect. He didn't scream. He didn't cause a scene. He just turned around and shuffled back to his room. When I finally went back to see him, the silence was different. It wasn't the silence of sickness. It was the silence of a grave. "His name is Julian," Mark said, his voice raspy. I felt the floor tilt. "Mark, He gave me his kidney," Mark continued, looking at the surgical incision on his own side. "And you gave him my marriage. Is that how it worked? A life for a life?" I tried to lie. I tried to say Julian was just a family friend, a colleague. But Mark held up my phone. The texts were there. The history of the last year was there. Every late night, I'm staying late at the hospital. Message was a lie that had now been laid bare. The irony was a poison. Mark was alive because of the man who had destroyed him. Every time he looked in the mirror, every time he felt the slight ache in his side, he was reminded of Julian. He was reminded that he was walking around with a piece of the man I loved more than him. The aftermath was a slow, agonizing rot. Mark recovered physically, but he was a shell of a man. He refused to look at me. He refused to touch me. He felt unclean, he said. He felt like a walking monument to my betrayal. Julian survived the infection, but the scandal ruined him. When the hospital board found out a surgeon had donated an organ to the husband of a woman he was having an affair with, the ethics investigation was brutal. He lost his license. He lost his prestige. And when he looked at me, all he saw was the cost of his obsession. We tried to stay together, Julian and I, for a few months. We thought the sacrifice would bond us. But you can't build a house on a foundation of stolen organs and broken vows. Every time we were together, the ghost of Mark was in the room. Julian eventually moved to the West Coast to try and restart his life. He didn't take me with him. Mark filed for divorce the day his doctors cleared him for full activity. He didn't want a dime from me. He just wanted me gone. The last time I saw him was a year later. He was at a park, throwing a basketball with some kids from his old team. He looked healthy. He looked strong. But when he saw me, he didn't wave. He didn't even scowl. He just placed a hand over his side, over the kidney that wasn't his, and walked away. I realized then that I hadn't saved him. I had just traded his physical death for a spiritual one. He was living, yes, but he was living with the weight of a debt he could never repay to a man he could never forgive. And I live in a quiet apartment, alone. I still have the surgical brochures. I still have the thank you cards that were never sent. I saved my husband's life, but in doing so, I made sure neither of us would ever truly live again.